Hey, I've got a dad joke for you. Is that okay? All right, there's a whole Twitter feed, so I'll stop myself after 1 or 17. We'll see. This says this: my wife is leaving me because I'm beginning to go bald. I don't mind. It's just hair loss. Waiter, I see your glass is empty. Would you like another one? Dad says, why would I want 2 empty glasses? All right, last one. My wife just told me to put the toilet seat down. I don't know why I was carrying it around in the first place. Nope, not going to do it. Nope. That was spiritual maturity in front of your face, right there. Well, happy Father's Day. Good, happy Sunday to you. The weather is beautiful, and I was telling the guys before the service, if someone wants to donate a couple $1 million, what we'll do is we'll build a new room that has walls that are on motors, and when it's a nice day like this, we'll just raise up the walls and have like this breezy thing. Does that sound good? I'm sure it's possible. We talked to, anyway. Everything's possible. So complete the sentence for me. We're going to shift gears for a second, all right? Complete the sentence for me. Jack, whose dad was an alcoholic, whose grandfather was an alcoholic, whose great-grandfather was an alcoholic, grew up to become complete the sentence. Preacher. Yes, I like it. We have some redemptive answers in the room. That's beautiful. Seriously, that's pretty beautiful. Oftentimes we would see in the negative form of what that would pass on from one generation to another. And the reasons that you may have answered, at least in the darker parts of your heart, that of course that person at the newest stream of the family has grown up to become an alcoholic as well, is that we tend to understand life through a principle that seems true, seems repeatable, seems like a pattern. And that principle is something like this. Says that who we become has a lot to do with who we've been conditioned to become. Conditioned by our circumstances, conditioned by our families of origin, conditioned by the dynamics of our ethnicity or geography or socioeconomic status, maybe conditioned by the predisposed vulnerabilities of our own minds and bodies and emotions, conditioned just by our life experiences, conditioned. But mainly who we become, and one of the central threads of my kind of thesis through this journey we're going on this summer is that who we become has a lot to do with the dimensions of the story or the group of stories that we believe about the world and we believe about ourselves and we believe about others. And all that to say, I want to repeat something I said last week that I think that bears worth repeating today, and it says this, that all transformation is ultimately story transformation. You change the narrative, you change the scripts, you undo the lies, you rewire and reconnect the neural pathways, and you'll see a changed life on the other side of that. And that's psychology, and it's true, but not at the deepest, most ultimate levels. Insert theology, insert Jesus of Nazareth, insert God's story into that picture. And more deeply, you find that your life and my life and our lives and the life of this valley and the community that we care so deeply about, you can redefine the story underneath the story that shows up on the surface. And when you see your story in light of the story that God is telling in the world and your world and through you as a contribution to the world, you'll find a changed life, a transformed life, a life of wholeness and healing where your deepest longings find resonance and home in the satisfying hope that is Jesus Christ and apprenticing with him. All transformation is ultimately story transformation. And by the way, Jack, whose dad was an alcoholic, whose grandfather was an alcoholic, whose great-grandfather was an alcoholic, did not grow up to become an alcoholic because against all odds, it was Jack's dad who rewrote the family story by experiencing the transformation of God's story. Jack is a real person, and so is his dad. Jack is my dad, and Dick is his dad. And so happy Father's Day to 2 generations of dad who's changed our story's history and the script. So we love you. That's the message. Altar call. Um, today, though, I want to tell you about a different guy. His name is Naaman, and I'm doing something I've never done in I think 132 Sundays. I counted this morning because I'm a nerd like that. I'm doing a message from the Old Testament, and he's a guy that appears in 2 Kings chapter 5, and if you don't know where that is, it's somewhere to the left of Matthew, and that's after 1 Kings, where we were for a while. And on one hand, this guy named Naaman, his story reveals to us something where there seems to be two opposite truths happening at the same time. He's living in two realities that are coexisting. And the first is this, that on one hand, success and respectability and status were all his from the outside. But on the other hand, on the inside, there was a hidden disease that he had called leprosy, a deadly disease that could not remain hidden forever. And in that mashup of fortune and misfortune, Naaman longed for healing from leprosy. He longed for transformation. And as it turns out, in our own ways, we long for transformation too. And his story offers us a pathway into this journey towards transformation that we are journeying together this summer. So I'm going to read the story. It's 15 verses long. Can you believe that? All modern psychology would say, you don't have the attention span to make it that long. But I believe in you. I believe in you. This is like a 60-second reel instead of a TikTok you pass by really quick. So pretend it's piquing your interest. There's a guy who's a king. He takes his clothes off. There you go. Wait for that moment. It's true. Now Naaman was a commander of the army of the king of Aram. He was a great man in the sight of his master and highly regarded, because through him the Lord had given victory to Aram. He was a valiant soldier, but he had leprosy. Now, bands of raiders from Aram had gone out and had taken captive a young girl from Israel, and she served Naaman's wife. She said to her mistress one day, if only my master, speaking of Naaman, would see the prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy. Naaman went to his master and told him what the girl from Israel had said. The king replied, by all means, go, the king replied. I will send a letter to the king of Israel. Let him know you are coming, and I will take my status and your status, exercise my power and privilege, and connect you to the guy that can heal you. That's my version. As soon as the king read the letter, though, the king of Israel, he tore his robes off. He lost his clothes. Why? He said to himself, says, am I God? Can I kill and bring back to life? Why does this dude send someone to me to be cured of his leprosy? See how he's trying to pick a fight with me? Verse 8, when Elijah, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his robes, it went viral, and he sent him this message. Why have you torn your robes? Have the man come to me, and he will know that there is a prophet in Israel. So Naaman went with his horses and his chariots, all the power and the status and the entourage of the ancient world, and he stopped at the measly home of the prophet Elijah. And Elijah didn't come to the door. He sent a messenger out to the door to say to him, go wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan River, and your flesh will be restored, and you will be cleansed. But Naaman went away angry and said, I thought he would surely come out to me personally and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God, wave his hand over the spot and cure me of my leprosy. All in one swoop, right? Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all of the waters of Israel? Couldn't I wash in them and be cleansed? So he turned away and went off in a rage. Naaman's servants went to him and said, dude, if the prophet had told you to do some great thing, would you not have done it? How much more then when he tells you, just wash and be cleansed? So he went down and he dipped himself in the Jordan River 7 times, as the man of God told him, and his flesh was restored, and he became clean like that of a young boy. Picture like a fresh baby's bottom, only your own baby's bottom. Verse 15, then Naaman and all of his attendants went back to Elijah. He stood before him and he said, now I know something. Now I know that there is no God in all the world except in Israel. So please accept a gift from your servant. End of reel. Are you tracking? Maybe. So let's unpack that. There's something in Naaman's story, multiple things that can be told to us about this journey towards transformation. 350 days ago today, Eliza and I began a journey towards better health in our bodies. Together, we're down some weight, like a small adult, child or man or woman, like a 150-pound person, human, gross. The journey's not been easy, but it has been transformative. Others in this church are walking that journey as well, and it's pretty beautiful to watch. And the journey has not been easy, but 2 weeks ago, we went to Gatlinburg for a couple of days, and we ate our way through every hill and holler. We didn't have a cheat meal. I had cheat days. And I came back, and I discovered there was a toll on my body. The weight of happiness for 4 days clocked in at 4 pounds. 4 pounds in 3 days of happiness. And it attached itself, and it began to put down roots. And so Monday morning this past week, I buckled down. We measured, we counted, we started weighing everything and putting it in this stupid app and counting the macros. And day one, I lost 1.4 pounds. Yay, God, hallelujah. Day 2, lost some more. Day 3, like my happy weight was all gone again. And day 4, I'm like, all right, I'm going to get past that margin. I wake up, nothing had changed. And all of a sudden, the scale, I had to do it 4 times. It went up 2 pounds. I was like, but why, God? Why, God? Why? This is not what I was expecting. It's not the effort I put in. It's not what I thought was going to happen. And all of a sudden, my 1-week plan to getting back on track seemed out of my control. And here's the thing about transformation that we see in the life of Naaman, that we often want it. We want transformation, but we want it in the way that we can control it. We want transformation, but we want to be the people who determine how and when it happens. And this is what we see with Naaman. We see a man who is longing for transformation. He travels to see this prophet. He is desperate, but he wants to control the means of his transformation. And all of us, as we're gathered here in this physical space today and those online, we inevitably bring with us these hidden desperations that exist beneath the surface for transformation. And maybe tomorrow you're desperate to wake up a little less lonely. Maybe you're looking to get past a level of grief you've carried for a while. Maybe you're just desperate to find a job that brings more stability and meaning to your life. Or you're desperate for a cure to the condition that is ailing you. And the question for Naaman was the same question that remains for us. How far are you willing to go? How far are you willing to go? How open are you to the presence and the love of God who longs to transform whatever you are facing today? This is just one of the tensions that we see in this story, in this text, where we see a desperate man, desperate enough to travel and go lay his vulnerabilities before this prophet who turns out just to be the attendant at the door. He's desperate and he's longing, but he refuses the means of his healing because he wanted more control over how and when and what river and who gave it to him. So let's talk about that guy Naaman a little bit more. Naaman has it together, right? He has it all together on the outside. He's the general of a country. He's a military guy he leads armies. He's a powerful person. God has given him victories. He inspires people. He takes initiative. He solves problems. He gives people directions. He's won battles. He's a guy that is respected. And he's a social influencer before the days of social media. This guy has it. He's got it in the bag. He's got it going on. And the story says that he is all those things. He's respected. He's highly regarded. He's influential. But beneath the surface, hidden to others, he has leprosy. Great man, powerful, strong, wise, but he has leprosy. And this is an important detail in the story because it tells us something about Naaman and it tells us something about our own lives. And that is to say that everything can look good on the outside, but on the inside, we can have leprosy. Leprosy was a skin disease that would often run its course over the span of 30 years. And throughout those 30 years, the more serious it got, entire fingers would fall off, hands, limbs. It's a disease that would bring about tons of physical pain. And once the word got out, so to speak, you would be marginalized and distanced emotionally and relationally within the greater culture. And so here Naaman is. On the outside, he looks powerful, but on the inside, he's broken. He's struggling, he's hurting, he's wounded. And all of us on the outside might look good at times in certain ways, but for many of us in different ways, true to your story, we're broken and we're hurting and we're wounded, and it exists. And today, you look at me, and on the outside, I look okay. John Warner said this is his favorite shirt that I wear, because apparently it does well on camera as well. I look okay, but let's be honest, you have no idea you have no idea. You don't know what hurt or struggle or thing that I'm refusing to give up. You don't know. We're in this together, and we're hoping that we can be a community together that spurs one, but you don't know. We don't actually know. There's something beneath the surface for all of us. And Naaman is a guy who wore a lot of armor, but beneath the armor, he's struggling. And for Naaman, no one really knows about his leprosy except for a couple of people, his wife and his wife's servant. It's a key piece of info. And so I imagine like Naaman's coming home from a long day just existing, his body's aching, his skin would be irritated, like he doesn't have hydrocortisone cream to grab from the cupboard of a medicine cabinet, he can't roll through CVS and get some relief, that stuff doesn't happening. And so every day he's feeling aches and pains, rash and scabbing and things to cover up and continue to hide. And we don't know how far he is into his battle with leprosy from the text, but it is enough that it's causing him enough pain to say, I'm going to go see this guy that I've never met in a distant land, be vulnerable now to saying, people will know why I'm going there, and hopeful for healing. And in that struggle, his closest relationship, his wife and his wife's servant, they're so brokenhearted that his servant finally looks up at him one day and is like, listen, just go see the guy. Go to Samaria. Go to the guy that could heal you. And Naaman is desperate enough to take up that offer. Then he writes this king. He has his king. So he's in the army. He's got a connection with the political guy. And the political guy writes a letter to the other political guy that's in power like, hey, can you just subvert whatever's going on? Get my guy to see the prophet. He's a friend. Do this. He does that. And in that letter, something funny kind of happens. Naaman's king sends the letter, and he says, I'm sending my servant Naaman to you so that you may cure him of leprosy. And the king reads that, and he freaks out, and he thinks it's a setup, because his response is this: am I God? Can I kill and bring back to life? Why does this guy send someone to me to be cured of his leprosy? This is a setup. He's trying to pick a fight. Well, what's happened here? Let's just call this a bit of a miscommunication. The kings misread the letter. Have you ever misread a text message? You ever read something into a text or a look or a one-word reply that wasn't actually in there, and it created this storm, this disturbance in the force that wasn't actually there, but then all of a sudden it was the thing that dominated your entire day? Yes. You ever been there? You ever gotten anxious about getting anxious about the thing that you're now starting to read into someone's misread of a text? You ever sent in a text that was very important to you and it says delivered, and then it's and then finally it says read, so you're like, oh, they're not ignoring. But then the response takes hours and hours and hours, and then eventually you get that one-word reply that says, sure. Hold on a second. I'm not speaking from experience, but sure. And all day you're like, what have I done? What did I step in this morning that wasn't? And then you get home, it's like, babe, I've had a really, really rough day. I'm sorry. I'm like, oh, you could have told me that 6 hours ago. Have you ever I'm just speaking hypothetical. This is a storytelling day. Storytelling. Oh, I'm bringing the Old Testament out. creative license. And so, like, have you ever misread a text? And that's what happens. And the king then sends Naaman to Elijah because Elijah, whatever response that got was insidious enough that Elijah hears about it. And so the king sends Naaman to Elijah. And it says that Naaman pulls up. I mean, imagine the irony of this. He's pulling up to probably the meager house of a prophet. Some think is like God incarnate, and others think he's this cuckoo for cocoa nuts guy that lives in a small house and claims to heal people. And he shows up to his door in chariots and horses as the sign with a letter from the king of royalty. This is the irony because he has so much power, yet he is so powerless. He has so much power and status, and he has so much influence, yet he is so weak to solve his own issue. And he comes to Elisha's door, and I imagine that Elisha is probably in some sort, like he's in that house. And all this stuff happens and begins to knock on the door. I'm getting creative here. He knocks, and no one answers. He rings the Ring doorbell, and the Wi-Fi's down. He knocks again, and no one answers. He knocks a third time, and finally the person comes out. And it's not Elijah, it's the servant. And Naaman's like, man, I command armies. Who are you? Who are you to answer the door for me? Power play moment, right? The privilege being tested. The control is being tested. And the assistant doesn't say, oh, welcome. We've been expecting you. Come on in. We have the carpet and the pillows and the tea ready for you. Can we share a meal together? She's like, yeah. You're one of many. Go to the Jordan dip 7 times and peace, bounce. And Naaman's like, what? He's mad. He's outraged. He's got all his power. Let me put it in terms of maybe an experience you've had. You ever call the local cable company when your cable goes down or your phone's quit working or your internet's down? Maybe this is the pride that's inside of me. You all check me on it. But I've learned a trick that rarely works but makes me feel better in those moments. And as the nice professional person answers the phone and they begin to walk through their scripted steps to help me solve the problem with my cable, I'm usually like, hey, I don't mean to be rude or disrespectful, but I know that it's going to take us 20 minutes for you to say, cycle the power, check your connections, and plug the cables in. I want you to know I did that 7 times before I called. So can we skip to the end where you will send someone to fix the part that I can't fix for my own? Oh, yes, sir. I would like for you to take the cable out of the back and make sure, no, you didn't hear me. I don't mean to be rude or disrespectful, but like, you ever had that experience? That's a trick. It never works, but I feel better afterwards. And so think about it. That's what Naaman is feeling. Don't you know who I am? Don't you know who I am? The king sent a letter, and you send your assistant, and all the assistant says, with no invitation inside, no conversation, just go dip in that dirty Jordan River. And he's like, that river's not even good enough for me. There's all kinds of privilege happening, right? There's all kinds of control happening. There's all kinds of checks and balances of his sense of power and importance. And it always begins with this when it comes to our transformation, same that it came to Naaman, is that it begins by laying down his own need for control and entitlement. Naaman comes. He's used to being in control. And for us, as we walk this pathway to transformation through the life of Naaman, I want you to know that transformation begins for you and for us when we lay down our sense of control and entitlement. Naaman doesn't want to do it. He doesn't want to do it. He doesn't want to do it so bad that he walks away from his healing in anger. Not that he didn't get the chance to have it, but because it wasn't on his terms. And he says these words, verse 11, Naaman went away angry and said, I thought that he would surely come out, it's a check of the ego, to me and stand and call on the name of his Lord his God and wave his hand over the spot and just cure me of my leprosy. Naaman's surprised by this. He's surprised by God's method through Elijah. And I think he's missing the test in the moment. What is God testing? God is asking Naaman a question I think he would ask us too. Naaman, will you be humble enough for transformation? At the core of your transformation the core of my transformation, at the core of my long-term apprenticeship to Jesus that brings more identity and wholeness and integration and meaning and purpose, is my willingness to be humble. My willingness to be humble and embrace humility. And you know what humility says? Humility just says that I don't take myself too seriously. Don't write myself off. I don't take myself too seriously. Humility says I don't have a need to show up everywhere with the horses and the chariots. Humility says I have no need to project myself as something that I am not. Humility says I have no need to be in control because I tried that and it didn't work out as well as I thought it would. Humility says I am open to things that are beyond my understanding, beyond my experience, and I'm open to submitting myself, yielding myself to something that I may not even totally understand. But Naaman is not there yet. And here's a question for reflection. When it comes to humility, what's your readiness level? Where are you on that continuum of brokenness and humility that would allow God to bring transformation? Probably the very thing that you are fighting and clawing and attempting to control to gain in your life is actually on the other side of humble acceptance of our own brokenness that says, God, do for me in your grace and in your love and your power what I cannot do. And I will never stop fighting for it. The effort doesn't go away. It just redirects to you. It redirects to the power source. It redirects to the mission. It redirects to living in light of this thing that you're changing inside of me. We all need some help. And humility is not thinking less of yourself. It is having a correct assessment of yourself. We need some help. Jesus said it this way, if you remember. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Now let me just say this to you. Map this into your own story. If it's not there, park it and have it accessible later. But sometimes what feels like humiliation is step one of your healing. What feels humiliating may be the very thing that's the first step towards some healing. And humility is kind of that space between where God has the space to operate. It's not that he's lost his power or that he's lost his plan. It's just that humility just makes us more aware of the thing that God's clawing and fighting to make us more aware of from the beginning. And it's in that awareness that we cultivate a deeper sense of who we are and a path forward in light of that. And I just wonder for us if there might be a new way to experience reality if we would be more open to God's reality. I wonder if our desire for control and our subtle and not so subtle exercises of privilege and entitlement could be stripped away so that the fruit of humility would be transformation. But Naaman, not you, Naaman is not at this point yet. He walks away in a rage. And then he's upset with the instructions, which are to go to the Jordan River. Well, why the Jordan River? Nerd out, but it's just dirty. He doesn't like it. Okay? He doesn't like it. Our girls have this thing when it's bath time that they want to drink the bath water. Like, gross. Ooh, yucky. And I've devised a phrase that has turned backwards on me that I thought might be like a thing to get them not to drink the bath water, but now it's just encouraging them to drink it and laugh harder. I was like, ooh, girls, don't drink the butt water. And they're like, butt water, and drink more of it. Like, no one wants, like, but here's the thing. Here's the thing. Forgive me for this. But does your desperation for transformation match the willingness to drink the butt water of life? Right? You know, like, that's just, it was there. It was there. I had to. But it's a real question. Just how desperate are we? How desperate are you? How humble are you? How willing to be vulnerable are you? Naaman, how desperate are you? Another example of our girls. Every day we try to pick them up between 4 and 4:30, depending on our schedules. It's Eliza 90% of the time. And every day she's met with 2 girls that have come like 5 minutes ago from snack at daycare, which is only 2 hours removed from lunch, which is only 3 hours removed from breakfast, with goldfish probably flying through the air constantly. They act like they're ravenously hungry and haven't eaten all day, every day, like, Mommy, can we have a snack? Can we have yogurt? Can we have gummies? And here's what happens. When Eliza, just for the sake of peace, and I'm trying to you're trying to come off a day of school, it's like, yes, just throw the gummies at you for a second. They're happy. But when you don't, all of a sudden, when it's the carrot sticks, or when it's the broccoli, or when it's the things that they're like, no, that's not what I want, guess what? All of a sudden, they're not hungry anymore. And the real question is, just how desperate is your hunger? What are you willing to do? What are you willing to press past? I have to ask, when it comes to our transformation, I've said all along that it is something we participate in. But underneath that, how desperate are we for it? How willing to go those places are we? How willing are we to confront our own inner person? How willing are we to forgive? How willing are we to go change the reality of what we're paying attention to? Desperation entails not just humility, but desperation often requires us to do what we don't want to do. And that's a tough one. My girls want to drink butt water. They shouldn't. They want to eat gummies 24/7. Well, they shouldn't. Naaman wanted a quick solution, remember? Why didn't you just walk out here and wave your hand? Why didn't you just put your hand over the source and heal me? Can you just come out here? Can you just wave your hand, God? Can I just sing that song one more time? Can someone just come pray for me one more time? Can I just read that book? Get that podcast? Can someone just solve my problem? Can I get into some nicer waters? Do I have to do it there with them? Do I have to go there? And the answer from God to Naaman was, no, sorry, man. You need to dip 7 times in the Jordan River. And maybe I don't fault Naaman for that initial reaction, because what's my Jordan River butt water story? No, I'm not going there, God. No, man, I'm good. I'm good. The bottom's not falling out. I'm okay. And then Naaman's servant looks at him and says, verse 13, listen, if the prophet had told you to do some great thing, would you not have done it? If it would have elevated your status, would you have done it? Would it have made you more money? Would you have done it? If it would increase your influence, would you have done it? If it would make you feel good about yourself, would you have done it? If it was on your terms and in your timing and on your schedule, would you have done it? And she looks and she's like, can you just get wet, Naaman? Can you just not get in the water? Can you just do it? Can you just do what you don't want to do? And finally, Naaman gives in and he decides to do what he does not want to do. And several reflective questions for us this morning. What is it that you do not want to do that is the barrier between you and transformation? What conversation do you not want to have? What bridge do you not want to repair? Where don't you want to go and do and see? Transformation often requires us to do what we won't want to do. I want to name what that may be for many of us, myself included. For some, it just means being vulnerable. You want transformation to come? It means to be vulnerable. And not to everyone, but to someone. To someone you can trust and say, hey, this is my struggle. This is where I can't get past. This is what I'm feeling. This is where my hurt is. We'd prefer, just like Naaman, for God to just wave his hand over us, quick and easy. Don't even have to get in the water. Don't even have to get in the water I would have chosen. But God says, I'm not just after your quick healing, but I'm after your transformation. I'm after the transformation of your heart. I'm forming something in you that goes deeper than dealing with the skin issue. I don't want just your symptom to be healed, but I want the root to be rooted out and addressed. God asks, are you willing to be vulnerable? Are you willing to open yourself up? And for some of you, you know what this means very, very, very practically. Quit hiding in plain sight from those that are there that love you the most, that will never give up on you and will never shame you for what you're struggling with. Some of you, go see a therapist. Go see a counselor. Schedule a meeting with me and I'll say, I'll pray for you and I love you. Can I connect you here? Go see that. Go do that. It might be being vulnerable to the person that you're the closest to, who's actually ready to receive what you've had because whether you knew it or not, you've been dumping on them for years anyway. And they're ready for your healing from the actual problem, not just dealing with it at a symptom level that feels like frustration and we're fighting and misreading texts. It's actually cries for help. And if you would just be open and vulnerable to it, there's an actual path forward. God performs miracles. God does wave his hand over things. I've experienced that. I've seen people experience that. But God isn't just after our healing. He's after what comes next. He's after the transformation. He's after the thing that he's forming in you. Naaman, will you be vulnerable? Will you be open? Will you be led by someone else? Will you let go of control? Will you say yes to doing what you do not want to do? And will you know what this means, like very practically? You have to share what you need. You have to share to someone, not everyone. You have to share to someone what your need is. Maybe you're having like massive just financial struggles. Let's just choose that. Like you're in debt beyond where you imagine you'd ever be. And on the outside, you know those commercials where the guy's riding around his mower and he's like, I've got everything I need. How do you ask me to afford it? I'm in debt up to my eyeballs. And like on the inside, you're robbed of every piece and you can't enjoy everything that you have. Like maybe the first step towards just some very practical financial transformation is letting someone know that you're getting buried and they can help you find a path out. Maybe it's using that word that starts with a B and you need to capitalize it and underline it and highlight it, develop it and track it. And then someone else needs to help you develop that. When we lack the ability to be vulnerable to one another, here's the very emotional thing that happens in this, is it stacks shame and shame and shame and shame on top of one another because that shame had no outlet to be worked through with someone else. When the community is lost, when I won't be vulnerable to the things that are even like, Liza can look at me and be like, day? Did you have a day? I'm like, I'm not ready yet. And then when I talk to her, it's like a burden lifts. It's a literal thing. I used to be a person, well, I still am to some degree. But how you doing, Matt? Good, fine. Everything's keel. Everything's even and consistent on the inside. Of course, there's ups and downs. You lose your energy, you lose your inspiration, you lose your passion at a time, and sometimes that would take days or weeks to come out of. Let me tell you, and then shame would stack on top of that for why, like, get over it. Why don't you just be mature? Why don't you grow up a little bit? But then you start finding that person. You find your community. You find your one or two people that you can trust to let that release itself to. And all of a sudden, what took days or weeks takes minutes or hours. And you've let someone on the inside that participates in that with you. And all of a sudden, you're living in community. And here's my point in saying that, is that when we lack vulnerability, it becomes disorienting to the way we see and perceive life because you lose the actual blessing of someone else's perspective. And vulnerability is also like the antidote to control. If I'm open with my struggle, I can't control the means by which it gets solved and how I feel about it because it's out there. It's out there. And I know that journey. And I know many of you know that journey. But if I could just be honest enough to ask you and to plead with you, say, be vulnerable with someone, and let's become the kind of people that allow that space with each other. That we can be people that are like the instruments on an airplane that provide orientation and spatial awareness of where we are on this shared trajectory towards Jesus and this life and this mission and our participation in God's story that he has for us. If we can do that openly with one another and just keep stirring one another and pointing one another, you'll be able to name the things that maybe you never were able to name. And in naming that, you'll be able to lose the shame that's attached to that. And in losing the shame from that, you'll begin to experience freedom. And in experiencing freedom, you'll be able to give away more freedom. And when you give away more freedom, all of a sudden you understand yourself in light of something bigger and stronger and more momentous. And you find yourself living not just as isolated pockets of people that we show up on Sundays, but as part of a movement that is changing the lives of one another in community and vulnerability and the power of God. And in a movement that catalyzes in this room, it goes out into our homes and neighborhoods, and we see literally the trajectory of our community change because we were willing to name some things in us with some people that cared about us, and we shared that path forward together for years to come. That's the future. The future of your healing is tied to someone else's healing. The future of your freedom is tied to passing that on to someone else. I'm not saying that we have to come to group share and you have to tell 40 strangers your deep, darkest secret. I'm saying find a person. Find one person. Find one person in this room. Find one person and do life. Go deep. Find it. And you'll experience a new way of living. And I've got to end, but this is the best part. This is the big moment of the story. So Naaman finally gets over himself. And God uses a person who was willing to be honest enough to say, get over yourself and go dip in that water. And he was vulnerable enough to listen. And so what he does, he goes to the Jordan River and he dips. He dips the first time. And he gets back out and there's nothing. Nothing. Well, this is embarrassing. This water is dirty. This is starting to be embarrassing. He dips second time, nothing. Humiliation starting to set in. I wonder if it was did he go to an area where there was nobody around, or is there like a normal dipping spot that everyone was at? They're gathering water, and he's over there like, You're just trying to get in a creek that's really cold. And third time he dips in, he gets back out, nothing. Fourth time, dips down, gets back out, nothing. Fifth time, it's really getting excruciatingly embarrassing at this point. He gets back out, nothing. Sixth time, dips down, nothing. But the seventh time, he dips down and he gets back up and has said that his skin is just as soft as a newborn baby. It's healed. It's made new. It's been healed. And catch this. It's in the dipping down and the getting back up. And the dipping down and the getting back up. And the dipping down and the getting back up. That we see another way of the way of transformation. That it's often the simple, regularly repeated, intentional acts that transform us. You may say, I'm trying to be honest about this brokenness thing. I'm trying to map that inside part of me. But Matt, the gap seems so large that there is no path forward. You may look at someone you care about and you're like, there's no hope. I've lost hope for that. How could there be hope? There's a guy named Wendell Berry who wrote some stuff actually about the environment. And he said there's a principle at play that I think is it's key to spiritual formation as well. And he used to say that people want a solution as large scale as the problem. And that's rarely the case. Instead, what usually is the case is a bunch of small solutions that stack and stack and stack and stack. And try this into your internal makeup for a second. He said that the problem, though, is people accept that up here. They accept that the way to solve a massive gap is through incremental, slow change, stacked upon stacked upon stacked upon changes. But it doesn't satisfy our need for drama. Could you just wave your hand, God? Could you just come over and have this huge moment? Give me the epiphany. Let me throw my fleece. Let me have my hands laid upon. Let me walk the fire tunnel, whatever your experiences are. Let me have that moment, God. And God does it. I've had it. God's done miraculous things in me that there's no other explanation than a powerful moment and change happens. Real healing happens. But more often than not, if we can lay aside our need for some dramatic thing, if we can let our psyche not facilitate that we have to feel the healing and just walk the path of healing, then healing will be felt eventually. Don't always trust what it feels like. Trust the trajectory and the aim and who you're doing it with. And one small practice after one small practice after one small practice, it's the cumulative effect of how God forms your character, not just heals your leprosy. He gets to your heart. And so the word for you today is dip again. Take another dip. Don't give up. Get in the river again. Someone come back into the orbit of where the river is. Like walk towards the river today. Get to the edge and take a plunge. Ask God one more time. Wake up one more morning and say, God, I give everything and everyone to you today. Wake up one more morning and say, God, I don't know how this works and it doesn't seem like it's happening, but I cast my cares and burdens to you because you promised somehow that you will carry them and make this thing feel easier. God, would you help my feelings catch up to the way that I know in my heart that you can heal me? I wasn't going to share this. I think I'm going to share this. If I cry, deal with it. A few weeks ago, it was a Friday, I had the girls, and I'm definitely going to cry crap. And I was driving, and just a thought came to my mind really fast of like, hey, girls seem really happy. I want to drive to St. Albans and see Granny and Papa. And Granny passed away a couple months ago. And I hadn't felt that grief for a while, because you go into like, I got to be the pastor at the funeral, and felt it more deeply when she went into the home and all that sort of stuff. But so I was just kind of confronted with this reality, and it lingered for a few days. And I just didn't go. I know I could have gone and visited Papa, and I'm sorry, he's standing back there, but I couldn't do it in that moment. And Granny had this thing with numbers, and she would see the combination of 3 number 7s in a row, and for her it would just meant like a really special, like, that's God telling me things are going to be okay. Or that's God saying to her, like, I'm with you, I see you, I love you. It was just one of those things. And she would do it, and she'd scare the bejesus out of us when we were in the car, because if you ever around her, it'd be like, oh, there's a 7-7, glory, glory, glory. I mean, she would like break down to this song and dance, and like, we need some more shouting. And like, that was her. It was genuine. It was genuine. And she would really, like, she'd see it. And I had noticed, I'll be honest, I don't know that I'd noticed that, taken stock of it for decades. A week and a half ago, we're driving to Gatlinburg. We're in the car. Girls are all in tow. We're going to this very special place where I proposed to her. There's family history. Mom and dad are there trying to have a 2-week literal reprieve in the midst of seasons of grief and COVID. Like, you're expecting God to do some like really restorative, resilient stuff down deep in your heart in vacation season this year, and you're asking for it. We're driving there, and the girls are actually kind of quiet, and Eliza does what she does best. When the girls get quiet, she just goes into a hibernation period in the car, because girl can sleep on a dime in the car. It's a blessing. That's why she can never drive on trips. But anyways, we're driving, and a car comes in front of me, and there's 777 on a license plate. I'm like, won't you will, Jesus, won't you will? Here you are. Here you are. We're going to the holy grounds, Davis, whatever. We're going to Gatlinburg. I'm like, you would, you jerk of a God. Like, you're so nice sometimes. I'm like, that's pretty dang cool. And we go, we have a great couple of days. And honestly, you can just sense that like mom and dad are experiencing real resting, peaceful days as we're there. It got a little disrupted by toddlers, but it was great. And then we come home, and I've seen a 777 on a license plate no more than 2 more times. So like in the last 3 weeks, I've had multiple, like, we'll just call them 7th dip moments. And that's what God is like. And that's God's attitude and his heart towards you. It's how he sees you today. And I just feel really deeply like a way to say, just don't give up. Is that, if there's anything to take from this message today, just dip again. First time in church today, 1,000,000th time, first time back from COVID, like just dip again. The water's the same for all of us. The power of God is the same for all of us. Just dip again. And I'm praying that God will give you some deeply transformative, life-changing, healing, encountering moments of that 7-dip experience, whatever that looks like for you, whenever and wherever. Take a walk, get in the woods, and say, God, give me the 7th dip moment. And if he doesn't, trust that it will come over time. Your heart's grieving today for Father's Day, just dip again. Your life says, I want to pass on what my father gave to me, just dip again. Your marriage is on the rocks, just dip again. You're concerned for your kids, just dip again. Your job sucks, just dip again. Your finances are a wreck, dip again and get a budget. You want to find where you fit in life? Go deep here, dip again, get on a team, get vulnerable, serve, do the stuff. You want to see the community change? Dip again, get in the game. Let's go somewhere together. And I just wholeheartedly know in the moments where God takes his hand and he just waves it over, and in the days where you just have to be reminded that, hey, Matt, even though you don't feel it, here's just a little glimpse of kingdom come, your will be done on earth, in the valley, in your heart as it is in heaven. Trust God, what God is doing, and keep dipping and don't give up. Would you stand? Father, in this moment, would you help us to have the strength, the perspective, the resilience, the grit, the self-awareness, the acknowledgement of our need. I pray that you help us today, wherever we are on the continuum of joy and depression, of happiness, sadness, of optimism for life and not physical pain, emotional pain, relational pain, spiritual question, spiritual doubt, a total spiritual outsider today. Would you just help us to recalibrate the trajectory of our hearts and our minds, our emotions, relationships in the direction of the Jordan River today? Take a step, and when powered by your grace and by your love, help us to dip again and find life to the full, find joy, find promise, find identity, find wholeness and healing. And would you form something in us that can be used to transform the things around us that you are longing to heal? You are the desire of our hearts, God. You are the thing that we are actually longing for. Would you help us to dip again? In your name we pray. Amen and amen. Amen.